So Maria's question is, how does a partner or a family member get someone in that they're concerned about to quit driving? They have alarm. So this could be a long answer. I've run into this a number of times, and over the years I think I've had different responses. So here's where I'm at today. I generally, hopefully if the patient is present, I always want their opinion, no matter what their capacity is, because they're important. And quite often they might say, I don't have any trouble driving, and they might point to the culprit and say, they're all wrong, I drive just fine. And if that's the case, I'm delighted, because I say, I'm glad to hear you feel that way. So would you be willing, and I always word it that way, would you be willing to go down to the Department of Public Safety and take a roadside test so you can demonstrate to your family that you're safe for yourself and safe for the welfare of the public? So now you've got a little bit of a verbal jujitsu on them. They might still say, spit in your eye, buddy, I'm not going to do that. I drive just fine. I don't need to do such nonsense. Okay. But I'll start there, because I kind of want to put the ball in their court. And I'll tell you a real life story. So I had a fellow that did just that. And he went down, and they gave him pass with flying colors. But they refused to renew his driver's license because he had a diagnosis of MCI. And I wrote a letter saying that he was living independently. He had some help, but he'd passed his driver's test, didn't have any problems with vision, and that at this point in time, despite his diagnosis of minimal cognitive impairment, that the state of Texas felt he was safe to drive on the road. But I'll follow up as I see him, and if that situation changes, I'll amend that letter accordingly. So the second part of that is they say, well, I'm not going to go do that. It's wonderful here in San Antonio because we have two facilities, Warm Springs and RIOSA, Rehabilitation Institute of San Antonio, and they have driver simulators. So instead of going out on the road, the patient at risk can go to the simulator, and it looks at reaction times and whether they're missing the stop sign and signaling, and they present them various scenarios, and it's scored, and it basically tells them whether they're red, yellow, or green lighted to drive. That's, I think, a kinder, gentler way to actually assess their performance and kind of give feedback, because the patient says, I'm fine, the family says, no, you're dangerous. So we've got this split, and we're trying to negotiate something for the patient's safety and the welfare of the public. And that's kind of my last piece. If all else fails, I kind of fall on my knees and implore the patient, if you believe you're a safe driver, so be it. But we're not just talking about you. We're talking about, and I get theatrical, we're talking about another car, maybe a young mother with 3 small children in it, and is there the possibility that you might be unsafe, not for you, but for them? And quite often, that I realize that's kind of sensational and maybe a low blow, but sometimes you have to reach if all else fails. So what is it? Desperate times call for desperate measures. So those are my thoughts. I guess if all else fails, then it's time to do what we do when all else fails. What do? We call the authorities. And they make the decision, and usually that comes pretty punitively. I've never had to do that. Now, I have had families that have gone to extraordinary lengths, hide the keys, dismantle the carburetor when cars had carburetors. And my most favorite was they put the car up on blocks and took all 4 tires off. But Well, I'd like not to come to any of that. Oh, I forgot to throw in, another thing I toss in is they say, when I was a little kid, I thought rich people had swimming pools and chauffeurs, so you deserve a chauffeur. It's time now for you to be driven around. And sometimes they smile and they kind of say, oh, I never thought about it that way. We're pulling out all the stops.